Today, we start the lecture of the course, the Python Programming. If you talk about the organization of this course, then there is mainly 3 points. The first is, this course teaches you programming in a step-by-step manner. Each chapter covers a major set of topics and builds knowledge as students progress through this course. This course uses the Python language to teach programming concepts and problem-solving skills without assuming any previous programming experience. With easy-to-understand examples, pseudocode, flowcharts, and other tools, the student learns how to design the logic of programs, then implement those programs using Python. This course is ideal for an introductory programming course or a programming logic and design using Python as the language. The second point is, it masters you the fundamentals of writing Python scripts. This course first introduces the student to the fundamentals of data storage, control structures, functions, sequences, lists, file input-output, and objects that are created from standard library classes. Then, the student learns to write classes, explores the topics of inheritance and polymorphism, and learns to write recursive functions. Finally, the student learns to develop simple event-driven GUI application. The third point is, that is all in 13. It means we will cover 13 chapters in this course. Let's see the brief overview of each chapter. The first chapter is an introduction to Python. In this chapter, firstly, we will see the process of installation of a Python environment in your PC. After that, you will be aware of meaning of the Python, the features of Python, and the history of Python. This chapter begins by giving a very concrete and easy to understand explanation of Python. You will be introduced to interactive mode, script mode, and the IDLE environment. After that, you should be able to write a first code in Python. The second chapter is Turtle Graphics. This chapter contains the tools for designing programs that are pseudocode and flowcharts. This chapter also includes the Turtle graphic library. The third chapter is decision structures and Boolean logic. In this chapter, the student learns about relational operators and Boolean expressions and shown how to control the flow of a program with decision structures. This chapter also introduces you with the statements that are if else, if else statements that are covered in this chapter. Nested decision structures and logical operators are also discussed in this chapter. Chapter 4 is repetition structures. This chapter shows the student how to create repetition structures using the while loop and for loop. Counters, accumulators, running totals, and sentinels are discussed, as well as techniques for writing input validation loops. Chapter 5 is functions. The name is enough to elaborate. In this chapter, the student first learns how to write and call void functions. This chapter shows the benefits of using functions to modularize programs and discusses the top-down design approach. Then the student learns to pass arguments to functions. Common library functions, such as those for generating random numbers, are discussed. After learning how to call library functions and use the written value, the student learns to define and call his or her own functions. Then the student learns how to use modules to organize functions. Next chapter is chapter number 6, files and exceptions. This chapter introduces sequential file input and output. The student learns to read and write large sets of data and store data as fields and records. This chapter concludes by discussing exceptions and shows the student how to write exception handling code. The next chapter is list and tuples. This chapter introduces the student to the concept of a sequence in Python and explore the use of two common Python sequences, list and tuples. The student learns to use list for array-like operations such as storing objects in a list, iterating over a list, searching for items in a list, and calculating the sum and average of items in a list. This chapter also contains the list methods, that are slicing, and many of others. This chapter also includes a discussion of the matplotlib package and how to use it to plot charts and graphs from list. Next chapter is more about strings. In this chapter, the student learns to process strings at a detailed level, string slicing, and algorithms that step through the individual characters in a strings are discussed, and several built-in functions or string methods for character and text processing are introduced. Chapter 9 is Dictionaries and Sets. This chapter introduces the dictionary and set data structure. The student learns to store data as key value pairs in dictionaries, search for values, change existing values, add new key value pairs, and delete key value pairs. The student learns to store values as unique elements in sets and perform common set operations such as union, intersection, difference, and symmetric differences. The chapter concludes with a discussion of object serialization and introduces the student to the Python pickle module. The next chapter is chapter 10, that is classes. This chapter compares procedural and object-oriented programming practicals. It covers the fundamental concepts of classes and objects, attributes, methods, encapsulation and data hiding functions, assessors, and mutators are discussed. Next chapter is inheritance. The study of classes continues in this chapter with the subjects of inheritance and polymorphism. The topics covered include superclasses, subclasses, and how init function work in inheritance, method overriding, and polymorphism. Next chapter is recursion. This chapter discusses recursion and its use in problem solving. A visual trace of recursive calls is provided and recursive applications are discussed. Recursive algorithms for many tasks are presented, such as finding factorials, finding a greatest common denominator, and summing a range of values in a list. And the classes Towers of Hanoi examples are presented in this chapter. The last and the final chapter is GUI Programming. This chapter discusses the basic aspect of designing a GUI application using the Tkinter module in Python. Fundamental widgets such as labels, buttons, entry fields, radio buttons, check buttons, dialog boxes are covered. The student also learns how events work in a GUI application and how to write callback functions to handle events. The chapter includes a discussion of the canvas widget and how to use it to draw lines, rectangles, ovals, arcs, polygons, and text. That's all. Let's meet